A State of the Science Conference on Research and Technology for Blindness and Low Vision, held at Smith-Kettlewell on December 4th, 2015. Highlights from a day of discussion and idea exchange among experts, consumers, and other stakeholders. Panel 1, Changing Populations. How should we change our approach to assessing and addressing visual impairments? John Brabyn.
This first panel deals with what the changing populations are that we are seeing out there and that the different professionals are dealing with, and what problems are coming up in the terms of assessment of the visual impairment or assessment of the problem.
Don Fletcher.
When I look at the last 30 years and what's changed just personally in individuals, I would say technophobia is dying. When I started doing this in 1985, 1986, if the magnifier had an on-off switch, if there was a light on it, oh, that's too scary. No, not interested in that. The geriatric population was not interested in that now. Now I have them coming and they want to do their emails. They're having difficulty with Instagram and things like that.
Arvind Chandra.
I'm here to talk about childhood visual impairment. For example, the three most common causes of visual impairment in the United States are cerebral visual impairment or brain injury due to hypoxia or lack of oxygen at birth. The second one is retinopathy or prematurity, which used to be the leading cause, but now is a second cause. So looking at the commonest cause, which is cerebral visual impairment, one of the most important things for the future is to assess it properly, to assess the spectrum of visual dysfunction that occurs with cerebral visual impairment or CVI. You could have complete blindness or low-level visual function deficits. You could have mid-level visual function deficits like perception of motion or perception of displacement. Or you could have normal visual acuity but have higher visual function deficits such as face perception, global motion, relative motion deficits, which sound like big scientific names, but in real functional life, they have a major effect on children who have cerebral visual impairment, normal standard visual acuity, but extremely handicapped in functional vision.
Ting Su.
Related to changing populations, there's definitely an impact on that in the schools as well. And also with the changing populations in students, there are more students with significant and multiple disabilities, a lot more of these brain-based visual impairments that I'm seeing as well. For me, it's understanding how that brain-based impairment is affecting their performance in the classroom, and finding ways for students to maintain active participation to whatever extent they're able to.
Betty Henry.
Primarily, if you look at changes, we do look at school-age students. We have many with dual sensory loss, many with cerebral vision impairment. There's fewer and fewer of those who have eye-based vision loss. The unaddressed needs. I would say the biggest one is what I call the visual impaired norms challenge. And that means that even if you get an assessment instrument that says it has VI norms, what does that mean? Because the norms for someone who simply can't see is very different from someone who also doesn't have language, has mobility issues, all the other things, intellectual disability.
Catherine Kudlick.
In the case of higher education, a lot of the resources are there, but the issue is about communication and about expectations and about ways that you can actually get buy-in from people that should be, helping out. So I urge us today, to use higher education as this interesting laboratory where you can see that expectations and context and society and expectations matter.
Bill Seiple.
Now with the interventions in wet AMD, patients are supposedly cured. They have acuities that are back into the 2060s, 2100 range, and the ophthalmologist no longer refers them for rehab or anything else. But I have data showing that even in those patients, that very few of them return to foveal vision. So what you're left with is a population who have good acuity in the ophthalmological world, but they don't have good function. They're still using some areas of the retina that are peripheral to see. In addition, once you start having usable pattern vision, then problems like contrast or binocularity appear. So the whole focus of the research turns to something that's a little more subtle.
William Good.
I view in the world of pediatric low vision, the important interventions over the next decade or so are going to be prevention. Just to give some examples, we have now learned that exposure to bilirubin, which can be elevated in as many as 50% of children, can cause damage to the visual cortex, even at levels that most organizations would recommend not treating with bilirubin lights and so on. We're learning that exposure to general anesthesia at the age of 2 years or under also damages the brain, and it can lead to long-term not only vision problems but cognitive problems.
Valerie Morash.
I wanted to follow up on Betty's comments. I know the testing issue is one that's likely to get ignored because there's so few researchers thinking about the issue. In fact, I actually accidentally fell into it when I was trying to measure common intelligence metrics for a different study, and what I discovered is that those metrics didn't exist for kids who have visual impairments. There are not accessible IQ measures. We currently don't have any assessments that really fill that gap.
This meeting is supported by NIDLR Grant 90RE5008-02-00 and Smith-Kettlewell. The views expressed in this meeting do not necessarily represent the policy of NIDLR, ACL, HHS, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government.